everybody. Welcome to a special edition of Ask an Expert. This is part 2 of the conditioning schedule workshop with none other than 5-star event rider, beloved Ride IQ coach, Jon Holling. Our first iteration of this catered to lower levels. So we talked about starter level through novice level. And pretty much the second we stopped that recording, my inbox was flooded with messages about when we're going to do training level and up. And thankfully, Jon continues to be incredibly gracious and generous with us and agreed to do this part 2 so that upper level riders have some guidance on their conditioning work as well. And this will stand alone. So if you haven't watched or listened to that lower level workshop, we will try to answer kind of all of the questions that you would have within this workshop. So you can just watch or listen to the one that pertains to the level that you're going. As always, this is live. So if you're attending live and you have questions or you just want to say hello, please use the chat feature to do that. And I have a couple of questions from members that were sent in ahead of time that I'll relay to Jon. Also, just based on some questions that I've gotten recently, all of our Ask an Expert episodes, including this one, are recorded, and you can watch the video afterwards on our YouTube channel or within the private Ride IQ member community on Facebook. And the recordings are also posted to the Ride IQ app 1 week later. So this will be posted on the Ride IQ app on Tuesday of this coming week. With that long-winded intro, Jon, thank you so much for agreeing to do this again. I'm excited to dig into these upper levels.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. And I'm thrilled everybody thought enough good of the first one that they wanted to hear more of my ramblings on how to get horses fit to compete.
Yeah, they definitely did. Before we get started, you look a little bit scraped up. So yeah. Are you okay? Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I'm totally fine. It's actually, the funny part is that I did fall on the weekend on cross country because I'm an idiot. This has nothing to do with that. I landed on my butt and I had a bruised ego. I tried to pretend that I was a little bit hurt for maybe 45 minutes because I'm a man. And then I realized that wasn't going to get me very far. So I just toughened up and went about my day and finished up fine. And then I got home Saturday night and I was playing with my dog on my son's bed, wrestling. And then I looked at Caden and I said, Caden, why is there blood all over your bed? And he looked at me and he looked at my nose and he said, well, because you're bleeding. And the dog scratched my nose right there and it looks terrible. It really wasn't that bad. But I remember when I was a kid, my dad, if you just brushed his skin lightly, he would start to bleed. I think it's like a family thing. We have very thin skin or something. So it didn't take much. And now I have this really attractive thing.
It's weird. Such a wild story. Just like the least expected thing that I thought that you were going to say happened. So I speak on behalf of all of us that I'm glad that is the story and that you're okay and that just your ego is bruised.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm okay too.
If you ever need to complain though, I like to lean into stuff like that. So I'll be here for it if you need to tell someone that you're sore.
You know when you fall sometimes and you're like, it's not that I want to be hurt, but I do want some sympathy. So I want to be a little hurt. And I was like, oh, maybe my back's sore and maybe my butt's sore. And then I was like, an hour later, I'm like, you know what? I'm fine. This is super disappointing.
You're like, no one cares about this, apparently.
Nobody cares. Just get on the next horse, stupid.
But your face does go with that story. So maybe that'll buy you some sympathy.
Perfect. I'm going to change the story. Don't anybody tell it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you're okay. And I'm excited to dive into this. We're going to approach this similar to how we did our first workshop. So Jon will go through each of the 3 6-week conditioning schedules that he has written out. So he wrote one for training level, modified level, and preliminary level. And he'll walk through that kind of presentation style. And then after that, we'll get into some common questions, some audience questions. definitely feel free to ask questions as we go, but just know that that's kind of how we'll approach the conversation. So with that, I'm going to add, for anybody watching the video, you can see this training level template is up, and this is just, a starting point. We'll talk about how to adjust based on your specific horse and everything that you have available to you in your schedule. But this is a starting point. So Jon, take it away.
Okay. So like we did with the last one of these for sort of intro to novice, I think one key thing here to know is this is not for horses that are like just starting to work. This is for horses that have been in sort of a moderate level of work. Maybe, for the time of year we're in right now, it makes sense. You'd be sort of doing your, like if you were up north, you'd be doing your light work in your indoors or, just sort of maintenance work, we'll call that. So if you're bringing your horse in from the field and you haven't ridden it in 3 months, you need to get them back to where they're able to lightly jump and do some flat work and all of that before you're really ready to start into this program. So this is not from the field to the ring. This is from the ring to the competition, if that makes sense. So we are on a 6-week program here, and you'll see I give the horses in this particular program Monday off because that's sort of a normal horse show person day off. I will say I prefer Sundays if I can help it. But once the horse shows start, that's not usually possible. So we're just going to, for argument's sake, say that our day off is Monday, but whatever your life is, if you need to adjust that day for you, by all means, you can do it. But I do think that that day off is super important. I know some people get really intense and they don't like to give their horses the day off. They want to keep working them. But I think for your mental health and your horse's mental health, or maybe just your horse's mental health, it's an important thing to do. So in this level and up, you'll see as we go down the weeks, as we get into that day after your day off, we start it with our 1-hour walks. Then as we get further down into the month, that changes slightly. We won't get too far ahead of ourselves, but we will talk about that when we get there. So we've got our day off. I like to hack my horses the next day, just get them sort of moving their body. When I hack them, like if I have one that gets a little bit intense and sticks its head straight in the air, I will make them walk on a little bit of a connection. But if they're nice and relaxed, a long rein hack is great. Make sure they're marching in this. It doesn't do you any good to go on a hack if your horse is just sort of poking along. They've got to be marching. And if it's possible to be doing it out in the field, in the wild, going for a trail ride, that's a great way to do it. Then your second day is going to be your dressage day. And then on your third day here for this whole program will be your trot day. Friday, we jump. Saturday, we're going to do some dressage again. And then Sunday here, one thing that's different at these levels than the previous levels is you'll see, which kind of maybe doesn't make sense, so I want to explain this. You'll see that we actually, in the lower levels, I have you guys doing canter sets right away. Like week 1, you do very short canter sets. The reason for that, quite honestly, is that what I have found is that at the beginning levels, it is just as important for the rider to learn how to gallop as it is for the horse to gallop. So at those lower levels, I really had you guys out galloping because I wanted you as a rider to get strong enough to be able to gallop later in the program. If we're talking about training level, modified and preliminary, I'm going to say that you're strong enough to be able to gallop horses. And so I don't think we need to start just with those canter sets. And so I have this play and field, trot and canter. So all that means is if you have the ability to get outside in a field, preferably something with a little bit of a slope to it, so you can deal with some balancing issues and go out there and play, right? It doesn't have to be in a dressage saddle. In fact, it probably is best if it's not. Put them in a jump saddle and a dressage bridle and hack them around, play with them, work them for 30 minutes or however long you work, and just a little trot and canter and have some fun. Lengthen the stride, shorten the stride, all of that stuff. So as we go to week 2, that kind of stays the same program. You'll see the trot goes from 10 minutes in week 1 up to 12 minutes in week 2. You still have your jump session. You do your dressage after your jump session. I try not to do a show jump lesson or a show jump school and then a cross country school back to back if we can help it. So I usually give you a day there. You certainly, if you feel the need, and you'll see this in some of the other ones as we go on, you can alternate that trot day and your jump day so that you have 2 days between your jumps. That's totally acceptable. And then you'll see here in the second week, we have the play in the field, trot and canter thing, or if you need a little cross-country school or have the ability to have a little cross-country school, that would be great. Just keep in mind there, you haven't done any galloping yet, so don't go bananas. Week 3, we up it to 15 minutes of trotting. So we're just gradually building that up. And then that's where we're going to start doing our first little canter set on that week 3. So on the Sunday, which is your day before your day off, you're going to do a 12-minute trot just to loosen up. Make sure you've gone for your walk and all of your hacking that we always talk about before that. You're going to do 2 3-minute canters. Or again, you could do that cross-country school. But if you do the cross-country school here, make sure that you get a little bit of a blow out of the horse and that it is getting a little bit more work than it would have the week before. Week 4, we go up to our 15-minute. Well, we're still at our 15-minute trot, sorry, but you'll see on the canter set, we do a 15-minute trot there. And again, your 2 3s or your cross-country school. Okay, so now this is where I added in an extra cross-country school for those who need it. And I feel like at the training level, quite honestly, you probably need it, right? If you don't need it, your horse probably needs it. We're not talking about super experienced horses or super experienced riders here. So if we're talking about going training level, from myself, those horses, they school cross-country, probably 3-4 times before they go to that first event minimum to make sure they're ready to go. So that's week 5. Now you'll see the day after our day off, we have our walk hack, our 1-hour walk, but I did add this little mystery thing here called round and down stretch. And so that means that I want you to actually walk, trot, and canter in sort of a nice round down stretchy frame, loosen your horse's back up, basically do a light flat work. If your horse is naturally on its forehand, then it doesn't need to be round and down stretch. It needs to be up and out stretch. But a lot of event horses are sort of high-necked thoroughbred types that get tight in their low back. And so I like to do a day of just kind of stretching them out and working them out. But be careful that as you're doing that, if it's a horse that is prone to being on its forehand, you don't spend too much time there, and then you might just work them a little bit more up. But we're talking basically like a light school. Don't go running around in all your movements and practicing your test that day. That's a day for your horse to loosen up its body and loosen up its mind. So here's where, if you've been having your cross-country schools and you're like, gosh, they're not quite good enough, or maybe you didn't do your cross-country schools on the Wednesday, that's where you get your first cross-country school. Then you up the trot a little bit there. And now we're starting to do what I would call real canter sets. So when I talk about a real canter set, those are usually 3 canter sets. So we would do a 15-minute trot, 3 3-minute canters. You would have a 4-minute walk break in there. I will say 3 minutes of canter isn't a ton. So if you do that first canter and you look down at your horse and you think this thing just is not even, he or she is not even remotely tired, you could shorten that walk break up to 3 minutes. And we talked about this last time a little bit. You can check your horse's respirations, and we might cover that a little bit more in the questions at the end if it doesn't make sense. But basically, you look down at your horse's side, you check your watch, you count 15 seconds, you count how many breaths your horse takes, either looking at its flank or at its nostrils, and then you multiply that number by 4. That then gives you how many respirations they're taking per minute. You would like to get them over 80 breaths a minute, certainly by the time you're into your second or third set. And then you'd like them, before you start the next set, to be down below that 80 threshold. That is not an exact science by any stretch, but it's sort of a good old horseman way of checking if your horse is getting a proper work. Your last week before your event, you're going to have another opportunity for your round and down stretching. You're going to get a cross-country school on the Wednesday. Your trotting goes up to 20 minutes. And now you'll see it's a little confusing, so I want to explain this. I've got you doing on your gallop day a 15-minute trot, and then I have 3 by 4 by 3 by 3 canter. So what that means is you're going to do 3 canter sets. The first one is 4 minutes, and then you're going to walk 4 minutes. Then the second one is 3 minutes, and then you're going to walk 4 minutes. And then the last one is 3 minutes, and then you're going to walk your horse out for 20 minutes till it's done. So that is your sort of training level plan. And when I talk about canter sets, those are up out of the saddle, basically your galloping position. I always call them gallop sets, but I was told that perhaps telling people to gallop means that they would be running around like crazy yahoos. And really for this, we want to be cantering sort of. You don't want to go any more than training level pace to go training level, and that's not flying. Okay, so just more than you would probably do in medium canter up out of the saddle, if that makes sense.
I'm going to have you repeat one thing because my brain was having trouble keeping up. So looking at week 6, at that final day that you have your canter set, 3x4 by 3x3.
Yes. So you're going to do your 15-minute trot. You're going to walk 2 minutes. You're going to canter gallop for 4 minutes. You're going to walk 4 minutes. You're going to canter gallop for 3 minutes. You're going to walk 4 minutes. You're going to canter gallop for 3 minutes. And then you're going to walk your horse out, which usually takes about 20 minutes. Does that make sense?
What is that first 3 in the series of 4?
Because it's 3 sets.
Okay. Oh, got it. Okay. So all of these start with the number of sets.
Yeah. So that is a little confusing. You're right. So basically, like if you look at week 4, it says 2x3. So you're doing 2 3-minute canters. So when I wrote it this way, and that might be confusing, so I apologize. When I wrote it this way, I was trying to be consistent that it was 3x4.
Got it.
But then I want a 3 and a 3.
Yep. Okay, perfect. And I can make little notes on these templates to remind people, or if you're following along, I'm going to give you I will give you these filled out templates as well, so you can make those notes as well. But no, that does make sense.
Okay.
Wonderful. Anything else to say on the training level before we move on to the modified level?
Nope. I think that's what I got there.
All right. Let's see how good I am at doing the screen sharing business.
It was there.
Present. Window. So we're moving up to modified.
Boom. Okay. So you'll see all of these are going to be very similar, right? Because it's a program. And so the program, if we do it right, leads from one to the next to the next. I will tell you guys, just so you sort of understand the way my brain works, and I think a lot of sort of trainers and coaches' brains work. When I start these schedules, I start on the Sunday of week 6 because I know where I want to get. And then I work backwards to get there. And that's the same way when I get ready to go to an event. I know what I want to be doing fitness-wise before I get to that event. So I start at that event and then I work back. So that said, you can see we still have our 1 day off every week. Week 1, we do a 15-minute trot to start. I think when you get to modified, that's sort of a great place to start. We get our jump school in on the Friday. We do so here I've sort of said we can do dressage or play in the field and trot and canter. You can certainly, and one thing that I do a lot is you can do your dressage there in the field in trot and canter, but in your dressage saddle, if you're going to do that and you have a hill, one of the greatest exercises I ever learned was from David O'Connor. And it was when you go down the hill, you collect. When you go up the hill, you lengthen. And not like flying like a Yahoo up the hill and being backwards down the hill, but just as you come down that hill, you raise the pole, you raise your shoulder, or your horse's shoulder, and you let them collect coming down the hill. And then as you go up the hill, you go sort of into that medium canter feel. It's a great little exercise for out in the field. It works on balance and fitness and connection and all of those great things. So that's certainly something you can do on that Sunday. The next week, we stay at our 15-minute trot. We again have our jump school in there. When I just say jump, what I'm talking about is show jump. But that said, realize this is all flexible. It depends on what your horse needs. I've had horses that they struggle with the cross country, so they do cross country more than they show jump. So be open-minded. But typically, if I have jump written in, that means we're going to show jump or gymnastic. We've got our Sunday play in the field trot canter thing. We talked about that in the last training level, so you got an idea what that is. Week 3, we're still doing our 1-hour walk after our day off. I've moved the jump to Thursday there, again, because I wanted 2 days off before the cross country school, and I wanted to kind of show you guys what I was talking about with that. To be honest, I don't know why I decided it was important to do it modified and I didn't do it at training level. But I was too lazy to go back and change the training level. So I thought I would just mention it.
I think your training level 1 had an option too, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
We'll say that was the thought process.
Yeah, I think it's more that, I didn't focus as much as I should. It's because of this head injury I have.
Right.
So then I have on that week 3 that's a proper cross-country school. And the reason I wrote that down, that it's like a proper cross-country school, is I thought if we're getting ready to do a modified, at some point I need to hold your feet to the fire and say, look, go jump cross-country. This isn't optional. You got to do that one. Okay. That said, if you've done it somewhere else in one of your jump schools and you're like, no, I nailed it. Okay. Then go play in the field and trot and canter. The thing with that cross-country school is it also is a bit of a fitness thing. So I would say if you don't cross-country school in that week 3 and you're going to do the trot canter thing, you might there actually do like 2-3 minute canters in your trot canter day, just to get a little bit of fitness in that day. Week 4, here's where we add in on the Tuesday, the 1 hour walk and the round and down stretch like we did in the training level. And again, remember, that's not intense work. That's actually almost like physical therapy, which if we're doing dressage correctly, it probably all should be physical therapy. And then week 4, we're upping our trotting to 17 minutes now. And now we do our galloping. We've got a 15-minute trot, and here's our 3 by 3 minute canters or the cross-country school. I will say I want you guys to have 3 canter sets, right? 3 canter days before you go to your event. So ideally, if you've cross-country schooled in week 3, you'll be cantering in week 4. If you need an extra cross-country school, then you might seriously consider making that Friday jump school into a cross-country school and then doing your Sunday jump. And like we did in week 3, if you're going to do that, you could also move that jump school to Thursday. That trot day, jump day, and all of these is pretty flexible as to you can swap them back and forth. It doesn't really matter. Some horses jump great after a trot set, and some horses jump great after a dressage school. So just kind of play that out. Okay, then week 5, we're still doing our stretchy day after our 1 hour walk. We still got our 17-minute trot. We got our 15-minute trot on Sunday with 3 3-minute canters. And now week 6, I changed this, and I'm hoping I did this right in the next one too. Yeah, I did. Okay, cool. I change it to long hack and dressage. So what that means is it doesn't have to be an hour walk, right? I want you to look, like I've talked about in all the lessons, and I think all of the Ride IQ coaches do. Hacking is super important. It's great for the horses. It's great for you. It's great for their legs. It's all of that stuff. But I also am realistic that doing an hour walk and a proper dressage school is tough. So I just said long hack. So like 30 minutes and then do maybe 30 minutes of flat work and then walk them out for 20. That seems pretty reasonable to me. But I know life is what it is. But I think what I'm trying to do is give you an extra day of dressage there, because as you see, I've got you guys doing a show jump school on the Wednesday. I've got you trotting on Thursday. I've got you doing a cross country school on Friday, a dressage school on Saturday, and then your gallop set on Sunday. Now, as you look at that, you're like, oh my God, that is a lot. But look, the show jump school could be 10 jumps if you do it right. The cross country school could be, let's pop up a ditch, canter through the water, drop off a bank, we're ready to go because it's been going great. So this doesn't have to be super intense last jump schools. It needs to be very thoughtful, prepping your horse for the stuff that they need. Like my horse struggles with combination, so I'm going to work on the gymnastics on that show jump school, and then be ready to go. Or my horse is just funny about ditches, so I'm just going to jump a couple ditches and I'll be ready to go. It doesn't have to be an hour and a half jump session, and in fact, it shouldn't be. And then you'll see on the fitness day, we do our 15-minute trot and our 3 4-minute canters, and we went through that, what that interval is, but it's a 4-minute canter, walk for 4, 4-minute canter, walk for 4, 4-minute canter, and then walk your horse out for 20 minutes. If you can use hills, that's great. You might even be able to shorten up the sets if there's significant hills. I would say talk to somebody that you trust who knows the terrain, and see what they've done if you've got hills, because that can change the length that those canter sets need to be.
For those walk breaks, between your canter sets? Like if we look at week 5, is that 3-minute canter, 3-minute walk break?
Well, it really depends, right? Like, yes, but it depends on the weather. It depends on your horse's fitness. So that's where I use the respirations. So if I get done with that first 3-minute canter and my horse is like at 20 breaths in that 15 seconds rather, that means we're at 80. So we're right at that threshold. So then I would probably say like, okay, at 2.5 minutes of walking, I'm going to check this again. And if they've dropped way down to like 50 or 60 breaths a minute, then I might say, right, at 3 minutes, we're going to go. Vice versa, if I get done and my horse is at 120 breaths a minute, right? So like up to 30 in 15 seconds. Is that, that's the way the math works. Then I might be like, okay, I'm going to go all the way to 4 minutes and then I'm going to check it. And if I'm still above 80, then I'm probably going to walk another minute. So I might walk 5 minutes and hope that it gets down below 80. And honestly, if it doesn't get down below 80 at 5 minutes, then I'm either going to be done or I'm going to significantly shorten up the canters that I'm doing and realize, gosh, I should have probably cantered this horse a little bit sooner in this 6-week program. And maybe I need to push off this horse show another 2 weeks. That said, it is not an exact science. There are horses that are what we call panters, and they breathe fast, shallow breaths. They just don't breathe big, slow breaths. And if you suspect your horse might be a panter, then I really encourage you to get a heart rate monitor and talk to someone who knows heart rate monitors and figure out how to use it correctly and know what your horse's heart rate is, because that's actually the scientific way to know how hard your horse is working.
Okay, that's super helpful. Does it indicate to you that the person, well, the horse, is where they should be if they are right around that, let's say, 3-minute walk break during your 3-minute canter sets? Like that's feels like the right amount for them, or anywhere between 2 and 3-minute walk break is sufficient? Does that indicate, is that kind of the indicator to you, like I'm on track?
Yes. Yeah. Basically, if your horse's respirations in 3 minutes drop down below 20, right? Down below 80 for the, I'm trying to make this consistent. If they drop down below 80 breaths a minute at about that 3-minute mark, you're probably doing well. I would say if you're just below 80, I would still give them that extra minute because you don't want to spike them way above 80 for the next one. So I usually like to try to get them down. Like if we're just being logical, you want them to look like they're ready to go. Imagine you're at the gym. Are you going to want to go do that next set when you're like, no, you want to be back to like a normal respiration, right? You want to be back to normal breathing. So I say 80. That's kind of, like I said, that's generic. That's what I learned when I was 19, which sadly is quite a while ago now. And so it works. It's a good baseline. But you just want to feel like your horse isn't exhausted when you go off into that next set.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head, for people who decide to use the heart rate monitor, what that threshold is? Beats per minute?
No, I could Google it on my phone, but I don't.
I'll look it up while you go through the next thing. We're looking for
that's why I've used heart rate monitors, but I have a terrible memory, and so I have to look it up and know for sure. And I will say, like anything, it's also a little bit horse specific.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like people, there's normal and not normal, and there's sort of a pretty standard number there, but it does fluctuate a little. So if you're going to use the heart rate monitor, I would recommend, if you suspect that's something you need to do, that you get it early and practice with it so that you know what's normal for your horse.
Great. I'll look up and see if I can find something about that threshold while you talk about preliminary. Our final level for today's workshop. I'm just speaking so that I have time to pull up.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah, I know.
Tell a story if you want. Okay, good. Thank gosh, I don't have to tell a story.
All right, here we are.
Okay. So again, guys, you'll see there's some consistent stuff here. The big thing is the numbers in the trots and the canters change. Really, that's the biggest difference with this program at preliminary as opposed to modified. So we've got our 1 day off again. We've got our hack days. We start that first week at a 15-minute trot. We've got our jump school in there, and then we've got our dressage or play in the field trot and canter, again, out in the field on a hill. That's always going to be good stuff. We stay at 15-minute trots that second week. And then we've got our play in the field trot and canter. And I didn't give you the option there to do an extra dressage day because I think you need the fitness, right? The start of the fitness there, because you'll see in week 3, we up the trot to 20. We have our jump school alternated back to Thursday for that one. And then I want you to have a cross country school. And I want you to have that cross country school having already been out in the field playing around a little bit so that your horse doesn't go out to that field and think every time they go out, they're going to jump. And also that you get a little bit of fitness in there. Then week 4, we're going to move that trot. Well, I guess we did move the trot up, in week 3 to 20 minutes. You see that there. And so in week 4, we're going to stay there. If you do the cross country school on Sunday, then, you probably switch those trot and jump days so that you jump on Thursday and trot on Friday. That gives you 1 extra day between your cross country. If you're going to do that canter, that's a 15-minute trot and 3x3 minute canters. I will say at preliminary, 2 proper canters of 3x4 minutes, I think is minimum for me. So if you're on a horse that you're confident enough with the cross country, try to get those 3 3-minute canters on week 4. If you need that cross country school, either make it your Friday or Thursday jump school, or when you get done with the cross country school, check your respirations or check your heart rate monitor and make sure, did this horse get an actual work cross country schooling, or did I just plop around here a little bit and have some fun? I will say, typically, I think cross country schooling, if you do it right, is actually cardiovascularly, that's a big word, cardiovascularly quite taxing on them, and usually gives them probably more fitness than a gallop. So you're probably okay doing that. We did add in that week 4, the 1 hour walk and the round and down stretch thing again. We do that again in week 5. We're still on our 20-minute trot. We've got our jump school in there. And now we've got our 15-minute trot and our 3 4-minute canters. So just to be totally clear, because I've been talking forever, right? I want to make sure when we do this, we're talking about go out for a nice long hack, at least 15, hopefully 20 minutes of walking, then you're trotting, then your 3x4 minute canters, and then you walk them out again. Now, in Florida, in the summer, we don't walk that much when we're done. We do that last 4-minute canter, and I get off those horses and I hit them with ice water as quick as I can, and then I might hand walk them until they stop breathing heavy, because walking them in 94 degrees with 80% humidity does not cool them down, and it's actually cruel. So keep that in mind, because we're in sort of late winter, early spring right now, I know, depending on where you live. But keep that in mind as the summer season comes, that, if it's hot, it's actually not nice to walk them when you're done with their work. It's better to get them cooled out. You'll see week 6, we move the trots up to 25 minutes. We have a cross country school on our jump day. To be fair, we've got the show jump school and the cross country school there. Like I was saying in the modified one, those don't have to be huge, massive efforts. And I realize that not everybody has access to a cross country course. So use common sense there. If you need a little something, you can be creative in how you're going to supplement that in your ring for sure. This is a little bit of an ideal world schedule. So just know that, if you get there and you're like, well, I can't do all this stuff, well, make it work for you. Everything's flexible. Everything's modifiable. Okay. And then we do our 15-minute trot again and our 3x4 minute canters. Now, one thing I just want to say about all of these is this is to get you ready for your first competition. This is not to get you too long. This is not to keep you going through the whole season. You have to, from here, get to that first event and then figure out which might be something we need to talk about at some point, Jessa. Okay, now what do you do mid-season, and how do we get these horses to along? I keep giving myself more work, but I think that is really the next piece of this is, okay, we got to the first event. Now what? How do I schedule a season? How do I know what events to enter? How often should I run this horse? And what's my end goal?
I love when the suggestion comes from you.
Oh, God. I think it's important.
Totally. It definitely is. And I mean, I really appreciate it. So yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I had a quick question, not to get like super nitty gritty on all this stuff. I'm just trying to think of what people might be curious about. On that Sunday, gallop day, 15-minute trot, is your walk break, is it the same approach as you're doing between your canter sets in terms of just recognizing when they're kind of ready to roll?
Yeah, I would say for that, I probably usually go at about 2 minutes.
Okay.
If I have to wait longer than 2 minutes, then I sometimes question, should I be galloping? Because they shouldn't be exhausted from a 15-minute trot. So I usually just let them kind of walk, catch the breath. I will say when I do my trot sets, I usually ride probably 3 holes longer than my galloping length, right? Because galloping length is cross country. So I have cross country length stirrups. Those are usually 1 to 2 holes shorter than my show jump length stirrups. And my show jump length stirrups are usually 2 holes shorter than my jump flat length stirrups. So don't trot in your cross country length stirrups. That's terrible. It makes my knees hurt just thinking about it. And it also can make it difficult to keep your horse up and through and like swinging because your leg is halfway up its side. So take that opportunity to shorten your stirrups up to get ready to gallop.
Got it. And the trot frame, is that comparable to like your marching walk day frame? Do you have them? I mean, how different is it from your dressage frame?
For me, it's my dressage frame. I would have them connected and round. I don't want them overly round unless I have one that's very high necked. Then I would put them a little more round and down. If I have one that's on its head, I would ride them a little more up and out, but it is absolutely connected and through. And I want to be thinking all the time about building their top line muscles, right? Getting them stronger and using this trot warm up, yes, to loosen their muscles up, yes, to add a little bit of cardio, but also to be building muscle and improving their trot and their strength and their back and their throughness and all of that stuff. So like if I'm trotting around and you were trotting with me, you would see I'd be in shoulder and right. I'd be in shoulder and left. I'd leg yield to the right. I'd leg yield to the left. I'd go haunches in. I'd go haunches in the other way. I would be doing all of this stuff. I'd be bending their neck left. I'd be bending their neck right. I don't just go out and just like off we go to trot. I'm constantly thinking of it like this. What does this horse need? Oh, he falls through his right shoulder. Cool. We're going to go counter bend, shoulders left, do a little renvers. Think about what you need and what's going on underneath you as you're doing those trot sets.
That's super helpful because I know, I mean, a lot of people talk about like how boring those can get, and maybe that's an opportunity for like their brain to turn on and turn it into something that's a bit more interesting for both them and their horse.
Yeah, well, and also the other thing, right, Jessa, is work on your position, right? If you get yelled at by your coach that you need to put your heels down, well, trot with your heels down. If you get yelled at that you're slouching, well, get your shoulder blades down and back. Like work on all that stuff all the time when you're riding, probably all the time. Those are great opportunities to keep improving all the basics.
And since we're talking about the trot, this started on talking about the trot during your gallop day, but on your trot day, which we have on this schedule on Thursdays, are you cantering at all on those days, or you're doing your at least 20-minute walk, then your trot set, and then a walk to cool out, and that's
it.
Call it quits.
That's all I do on those days. I think it's important for them. It's sort of like taking them to the treadmill, right? It's important base fitness to get them to go out and just build that top line. And, you know, if you think about it, if you're doing a dressage school, even one of mine, who I have seen the comments that my warm-ups are actually full rides, but even one of those, you're not doing 20 minutes of trot straight, right? You're doing maybe 20 to 30 minutes of work, but there's walk breaks in there. I'm talking to you. We're hanging out. We're watching my dog attack a squirrel, all that stuff. Oh my God. There was a snake in my indoor yesterday up in the rafters. Sorry.
Oh my God.
Yeah, this made me think of that. So you're doing that sort of stuff in those dressage rides. So there's breaks in there. So while a 20-minute trot maybe is like, well, that's only 20 minutes of work. We didn't do any canter, but it's 20 minutes of solid jogging. And that's a pretty significant work. So yes, I walk for 20, I trot for 20, I walk for 20.
Great. And then back to the canter day, gallop day. Is the approach to speed the same for all of these 3 levels, which is like hover around the speed that you'll be going at a competition?
No, I go slower than I compete. So now that said, not to sound like a jerk, but like at some point you can only go so slow. So like you're probably at starter level, you're going to be cantering, gallop setting faster than you compete, because if we went the speed that they have you compete at, you probably would be trotting. Right. But I want you cantering. I want you cantering those. But by the time you get to preliminary, I think, no, you don't need to be really going preliminary speed. You could certainly at times going up the hill, go preliminary speed, but then at other times you're probably going to be going novice speed. It should be more of a canter than a full out gallop. Speed is what breaks down horses. So we're doing 3 4-minute canters. If we do math, that's 4, 8, 12 minutes of cantering. There is not a preliminary horse trial in the world where you canter for 12 minutes. So you're getting that cardio built up without the speed, and that's kind of the idea behind it. Great. So like a 5-star horse does not often do 5-star cross-country speed when they're doing their fitness work at home. On that note, one other thing I would say that always kind of perplexes me and honestly makes me a little crazy is when I get a student who says to me, I'm getting time penalties. I need you to mark out how fast preliminary is so I can practice going the right speed. And what I want to say, and I'm going to say it now, is when you are competing preliminary, it is very unlikely you are going preliminary speed. At a competition, at a preliminary, you're probably at times going intermediate speed, because at other times you're going to be going training level speed. And what you need to do is be willing to learn at the competition, what does that feel like? Because you cannot simulate it at home. And that might mean you lose a ribbon because of it, because you have to learn that. You have to start your watch. You have to know where your minute markers are on course. You have to learn this stuff as you go, and you might win the dressage. You might show jump clear, and then you're going to go out and you'll be like, holy cow, I had 6 time penalties I shouldn't have had if I'd just gone faster. Cool. Then next time, go faster and be willing to learn it at the competition, because I don't think setting it out at home is all that helpful.
That makes complete sense. Yeah, get those reps in so you can really like calibrate yourself as you're on course, what the right like overall picture is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I'm not just saying that to you guys. Like I went out this last weekend on Kurt, right? Fernhill Copain in the 3-star. And I was still trying to figure out what bit to use. I changed it twice in the warm-up, trying to figure out how am I going to ride this horse? That's a horse I've had in my barn for quite a while, and I'm still trying to work it out. And the reality is I cannot figure it out. He's a bit of a trick, but I cannot figure it out at home because he doesn't have the adrenaline pumping like he has at the horse show. So I actually gave up probably 7 or 8 placings that I was annoyed about because I was trying to figure out a bridle and I didn't get it right. But I have to be willing to do that at the event so that hopefully by the time I get to Ocala, I have it more sorted out for the long.
Yep. That makes complete sense. That actually relates to a question I had, which is on your gallop days. I mean, I was going to say, should you be using your cross country bit? Should you have studs in? I mean, I guess that's probably dependent on, I'm trying to understand, like, should you simulate things that you expect to be doing at the show? But I mean, I also recognize that the footing that you're on conditioning day is not necessarily the footing you're on at the show. So what do you
So
think?
I will say I'm trying to use less studs in general. I think the more you stud them up, the more they sort of have that jarring when they canter or when they land up a fence, their feet, those studs catch in the grass, and that sort of jarring feel, I think, is quite hard on their soft tissue. So now, full disclosure, I also think that's why I fell off on the weekend, because I didn't have big enough studs in. So it's a bit of a learning curve.
There you go.
But
you're
no,
practicing what you preach. You're allowing the learning to happen.
Totally. I mean, that one hurt a little bit, right? I was very injured.
Right.
But no, you have to. I do not gallop at home in studs unless it's like really bad ground. And then, to be honest, I wouldn't gallop. So no, I don't gallop in studs at home. It's a little bit horse dependent. I try to do my gallop sets in my dressage bridle or my dressage bit, because I feel like sometimes the jump bridle for some of my horses is pretty strong, and I don't want to put them in that for no reason. So I think kind of you have to play that out. That said, some horses, if I put them in their dressage bridle and I gallop them in that, they're just running off of me, and then I'm hanging on their face the whole time, and that's terrible for them as well. So then I might put that type of horse in a jump bridle so that I can ride light and soft.
Yep.
So you do have to kind of play that out. Unfortunately, there's no black and white answer to that one.
Got it. And while we're on the topic of equipment, are you galloping in just bell boots as far as legs go?
So I always wear boots all around. I use open fronts at home because I think their legs can get quite hot. So my horses go in some kind of a brushing boot. Mine right now are in Escadron open fronts. I've got all of them in those. I don't use bell boots unless I have one that I think is prone to overreaching. I am a firm believer that bell boots do not keep shoes on. Bell boots keep horses from grabbing heels. So if you have a horse that's losing shoes all the time, bell boots are not going to help you. They will keep your horse from grabbing a heel potentially, but that's it. If your horse is constantly pulling off shoes, you either need to have them more balanced or get a new farrier.
Okay. Good to know. And we had a question from Robin in chat regarding your canter sets. Do you ever do any counter canter during your canter sets?
Yes and no. So when I do my canter sets, one of the big things that I do, and I will say this, actually, this is an important thing about your trot as well. So let's start there and then I'll get to this. When you do your trot, change your diagonals. Don't trot the whole thing on one diagonal, and every 3 to 5 minutes, change diagonals. I think that's super important. When I do my gallops, if I am doing it at home, I have basically like a grass track around my paddocks and my cross country field. So I do right loop, then I walk, I do my second set left loop, then I walk, and then my third set, I pick up canter and I make it into a big figure of 8, and I cut across the middle of my gallop and then finish to the left. If I couldn't go across because the whole center was full of paddocks, or a pond or whatever, then yes, I would probably start out on the counter canter lead, try to hold that for half the gallop, and then swap over to the correct lead. So yes, I will sometimes counter canter, but it's more about trying to train them evenly on both leads than it is the actual exercise of counter canter. And that holds true as well. Like, I also have a place where I'll go with the horses where it's not really a loop that I'm doing so much as it's a hill. And so I will canter left once, right once, and then try to do half left, half right on that last set.
What a great question. I hadn't even thought of it, but that was a great thing to clarify. So thanks for that question, Robin. We also had a question from Kathy Barr, Coach Kathy Barr on Ride IQ. She said, if I was trying to reduce the concussion on my prelim horse who's running about one event a month, should I use swimming as an alternative to galloping? She said, I think I'm not reading this perfectly. She said, would swimming be a suitable alternative? If so, how many gallops would I still need to get in each month to make sure that I was prepared and fit? And how often could I replace a gallop with a swim?
Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a longer answer. So as far as the respirations go, yeah, absolutely. Cardiovascularly, you can 100% completely substitute gallops with swimming. Couple disclaimers though. Swimming can make horses back sore, so introduce it very slowly. And I personally always like to ride them before they go to swim. So they'll get a work in the morning, like a proper, whatever that day is, work, and then they go to the pool. They usually would swim at least a couple days a week to make that work. You also can substitute the trots with an aqua tread. So that's another option to minimize the pounding. The problem is you don't get concussion, which actually does harden up their legs. It hardens up their bones. It hardens up their tendons. It makes them a little bit tougher. But that said, I had a horse named Downtown Harrison quite a few years ago that I was moderately successful with. And his last 3 years of his career never did one gallop set because he got hurt twice. And I knew that he got hurt because of all of the pounding and the galloping, and I couldn't keep him in one piece. So he never galloped. He would trot, and then he would go to the pool. He went to the pool 2 to 3 days a week. One of those would have been an aqua tread, and then the other 2 were swims. And that's how I got him fit the whole last 3 years of his career. He won Bromont. He went to a Nations Cup team. He went to Buccalo again, and he was actually a really successful horse. He was a great horse, but I had to be really thinking outside the box. And I understood there was a risk I was taking by not galloping, that he wasn't getting the concussion, which kept him in one piece, but also meant, I was missing something because of it, and I had to do it.
So for a horse, like if you had a student who was running at prelim and their horse was managing the gallops and the competitions without injury, would swimming be something that you like if they suggested swapping in a swimming day for gallops, or even more than just a swimming day, but like putting that into their program, would you be on board with that? Or does it feel like maybe that's not necessary because they're doing okay with the concussion right now? Or does swimming help with the longevity? So that's like thinking ahead for that horse.
I think I would add swimming in if I had a horse that I was worried I wasn't able to get fit enough, whether that was because of soundness or because of their breeding or their body type. Then I would add swimming in. Okay. I wouldn't necessarily add it in just because I'm like, oh, I'm going to get more out of this horse because of it. Because look, there is risk to swimming. There is actually significant risk to swimming. I almost had one drown once, which was pretty scary. I've had one jump into a pool. I've had one jump out of an aqua tread and land like a wet fish on the floor flopping around. And they can get really back sore from it. So I use it, but I only use it if, like I said, I think a horse isn't going to be fit enough, or soundness wise, I need to do it, but it's not for me. And that doesn't necessarily mean I'm right, because I know people who do swimming are like, no, it's great. And it is great, but just know there is that safety risk to it. And there is also that back soreness risk to it. And I think, that said, yes, if somebody came up to me and said, I really want to swim this horse, I think you can absolutely substitute those gallops with it. I think you need to be honest, you need to talk to the guy who runs the pool, and you need to find out how they recommend introducing it. Usually they're racehorse people, so they actually really know how to use the pool far better than I do. When I used it, like I said, I used it 2 to 3 days a week, and it was not like I could just go on Sunday and swim and that's good, I'm good for the week. You had to use it 2 to 3 days a week, kind of minimum, to get that done. And that meant your horse still had to do its trot set or its dressage school that day, or maybe a jump. And I always like to do that work first and then send them to the pool. And the scheduling of that can get a little bit tricky because, it depends on when they have the pool available as well.
Yeah, even just following these schedules with, working 6 days a week is a lot for people to manage often. So yeah, adding in the pool.
But no, I mean, in the right situation, I'm a huge believer in pools and aqua treads, but I just think you need to be thoughtful. Like, I don't want you to leave here and be like, oh, cool, I can go swim my horse instead. There is risk involved to doing it.
Yep. Okay, that makes complete sense. A bit of an aside, I forgot to mention, I looked up the anaerobic threshold for horses in terms of heart rate. And it's, I mean, like you said, there's kind of, the window varies based on what source I'm looking at, but it seems like it's right between 165 and 175 beats per minute for anyone who's going to use a heart rate monitor. Kathy had one more question, and she wasn't the only one with this question. She said, if it's done in a safe and savvy way, she's getting 2 horses ready for preliminary on a tight schedule. Could she pony one horse for the hack days and trot sets, alternating who was ridden and who was ponied to get enough fitness value out of those sessions for them to count? Or do you find the horse being ponied is at a disadvantage?
No, totally. You can do it. It's no problem. We used to do it all the time. It is actually a lost art. I don't even do it on my farm that much, and I don't know why, other than I'm just like stubborn. But I mean, when I worked for Peter Gray and Paul Delbrook, we ponied horses on the side of the road and went on 40-minute trot sets. The horse that we had ponied was in side reins and a bridle and had a halter over the top of it. And we ponied all the time. And I don't know why I don't do it anymore. I mean, look, I think there is obviously more benefit to getting on and riding them and making them be nice and through. But yeah, you can pony them, and you can pony them in side reins if they need it. I do think personally, and I could be open to debate on this, I feel like if you're going to pony for the trot set, you probably want the side reins on so that your horse is working in the correct frame. But again, be careful, because if they aren't used to side reins, they can hit those and panic and go up, which obviously we don't want. But yeah, I think ponying is fine. And I think it's a good idea to alternate that for sure. Which horse you ride and which horse you pull. But I think you'll also probably find, like, you know what, it works way better when I ride this one and pony that one. So yeah, you can do it. It's been done for eons, and it seems to be a lost art, because when I mention it to the working students that we're going to pony hack something, they all usually look at me like I'm insane, which is their usual look for me, but like a little more insane.
Yeah. It's a different variety of the look.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we also address, based on looking at this template, when does the show happen? So what we're seeing here is like the final day of this template is a gallop day on a Sunday. The show is that following Friday.
Basically, basically it would be the following weekend. So I would say minimum you want 4 days from that last gallop to cross country day. Ideally, you want 5 to 7 days from your last gallop to your cross country day.
And that final week leading up to the show, is it just like overall much lighter work? Would you prefer to incorporate jumping? Would you prefer not to? What do those days kind of look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, maybe what I should have done is had the last day be the event on this and made it a 7-week deal. So for all of these, I would duplicate basically what we finished with, other than you may not need 2 jump schools that last week. So my last week before the event, if we just imagine there's another box there, we'd have off on Monday. We'd have our long hack dressage on Tuesday. We would jump on Wednesday or Thursday, depending on when the horse show started. So let's just pretend, for argument's sake, that this is Saturday, Sunday horse show, okay? Like back in the old days when that's what we used to do. If it's Saturday, Sunday, I would jump on Wednesday, and then I would have, depending on my horse now, I might say, you know what, this one is tough on the flat. I'm doing 2 days of dressage, and I'm not trotting this week. And I think that's acceptable. If you're going to do that, just make sure you, on that show jump school day, you maybe go for a brief trot, like a 15-minute trot, and then do your jump school. If your horse is great on the flat and you're like, you know what, 2 days of dressage and then Saturday dressage make me, really stressed out, because that's a lot of circling, then keep your trot day there on Thursday. Friday would be dressage again. And then Saturday, you're at the event. And that Friday, here's the other thing, you might have to factor in shipping, right? So let's say I'm going to go back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Let's say I was going to be eventing in Michigan, in Metamora, Michigan. So I know that I compete on Saturday. I'm going to probably, because that's a long enough drive, ship there on Thursday. Well, depending on how long that drive is and how terrible Chicago traffic is, because that's like the worst traffic in the world. It's worse than Atlanta. I don't care what anybody says. I might say, you know what? I'm riding Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. My horse is off Thursday. And then I'm going to flat them at the event on Friday and be ready to go Saturday. That's acceptable. That might be what you need to do. So if that's the case, I'd flat them Monday. I'd jump them Tuesday or Wednesday. I'd flat them the other day. I'd ship them Thursday and do flat work Friday.
Got it. Yeah, that's super helpful. And then the last thing I want to make sure that we touch on is flexibility in terms of the number of days in the week that a horse is ridden. I know we talked about this at the lower levels, but it's different for these levels. If somebody says I can only ride 5 days per week, do you say then preliminary is probably not the level we're going, or what's the thought process around days of the week for conditioning a horse for any of these 3 levels?
So I would say that for me, you need to be riding 6 days a week. That said, I have been told that there are some very successful programs of people that we all know who are household names that ride 5 days a week. And that's the way they do it. It's the way they've always done it. And it works just fine for them. So it can be done. It makes me a little uncomfortable, but I know people that do it. So I'm not going to tell you can't. I would say then that probably means from the beginning, you don't get that hack day, right? You come out that day after your second day off and you're doing flat work. You know, you're hacking, but then you're doing a proper flat school and you're not going to get, your horse is not going to get that walk day. But yeah, I think 5 days a week, apparently it works and you can still do it. It just isn't what I've ever done.
Yep. Okay. Super helpful. And I think that you have equipped a lot of people now at a lot of levels with everything that they need to make sure that they get to this first show of the season or the first couple shows of the season with a horse that will be ready underneath them. And their legs, the rider's legs will be ready too. So
absolutely.
Really can't thank you enough, because these workshops do take a lot more thought and work on your part ahead of time, and you've been so on top of it and so willing to do it. So thank you for helping everyone by doing that work.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to do it, and hopefully it sort of gives everybody at least a base outline of what to do to get ready. Like, that's the idea. And I know I said it before, but I think it's super important. We're dealing with a horse and a rider and life and family and kids probably and students and pets. This is just a basic outline, and it is flexible. There's some important parts to it that I think are pretty obvious. So stick to it as best you can, but also know I am sympathetic to the fact that we all have lives as well.
Yep. Well, wonderful. Thank you, Jon. Good luck, everyone, on your competition preparations. We're officially in the spring and in that mode in a lot of areas in the US anyways. So that's exciting.